For step 1, draw an outline for the picture with an HB pencil and then paint the sky wet into wet. So I'm using quinacridone pink, you can use permanent rose, for the main sort of colour for the sky. So mixing up a big puddle of pink here, sort of like a milky consistency. So mixing up another puddle of pink. Again, plenty of paint, it's a large area. So again, milky consistency, and I'm adding a pinch of ultramarine. And this is for the darker part at the top of the sky. So a little bit more ultramarine here. I'm also using Ochre pink. You can carry on with the pink that you're using. I just fancy putting a bit of this pink in the sky just because I love it so much. So I'm also mixing a little bit more of the quinacridone pink here with a pinch of Hansa Yellow Deep. Any yellow will do. So just adding a little bit more of that just to warm the pink up a little bit, and adding lots of water as well, making sure I've got plenty of paint for the sky. So I'm wetting the sky with my 1-inch flat brush down to the horizon. And you can sort of paint around the boats if you want to, but you can also paint over the top of them because it's such a pale colour. So I'm starting with the Ochre pink in the sort of middle of the sky using my size 8 mop brush, loading that colour. I actually got a little bit of contamination there on the brush. Not to worry, I just blended that away. Loading my brush with the pink with a pinch of ultramarine, painting the top part of the sky wet and wet using a larger brush. It's a nice large area here, so it's kind of like a pink violet, and I'm tilting to allow the paint to flow and then collecting the puddles at the sort of edge there with a clean damp brush. Loading my brush with the pink with a pinch of yellow, painting this warmer colour on the horizon, rinsing my brush, taking off the excess water on the side there, and then blending just above just to create a paler sort of cloud bank there. Blending a little bit more of the quinacridone pink there just above, blending, tilting now, just collecting those puddles, loading my brush with more of the quinacridone pink and painting wet into wet, tilting at the same time, just going towards the horizon there, allowing the paint to flow and to create these sort of natural sort of looking clouds in the sky. Mixing a little bit of Paynes grey into the ultramarine and pink here. And I'm just painting a slightly darker sky at the top, a little bit more ultra, it's not quite dark enough. And this is all wet into wet with a large mop brush. And I'm just going to tilt now to allow that paint to flow down and to blend. And if it's not flowing down, you can use a spritzer bottle just to spritz the paint gently. Don't over spritz because you'll over dilute, and just tilt and blend and allow the paint to flow down. And if there's any puddles on the side, remember to collect those with a clean damp brush, and at the bottom as well. That's what I'm doing here using my size 8 round brush. Rinsing my brush, I'm just using a clean damp brush just on the horizon area as it goes into the sea, just to blend and soften so I don't get any hard edges there. For step 2, I'm going to paint the water wet into wet and the reflections damp into damp and the distant land damp into damp. So I'm adding a little bit more pink into the Paynes grey and ultramarine, and I'm also going to add a pinch of raw sienna as well. So I'm mixing up the quinacridone pink here with a pinch of ultramarine, and this is all for the colours in the water. And I'm just adding a little bit more pink, starting off with the pink with a pinch of the Hansa Yellow Deep, painting with a large mop brush, wet into wet, just going back and forth, keeping really straight horizontal marks and lines there. A little bit more of the pink as you saw there, going back and forth, blending with my mop brush. A little bit of the pink with the Paynes grey and raw sienna wash there. And now I've added a little bit more raw sienna right at the bottom there, blending it with the wash above, and just going back and forth, adding a little bit more of that darker pink there and just blending. Adding some burnt sienna now in with the pink and the ultramarine, and just painting this slightly stronger colour damp into wet in the foreground area, keeping the marks horizontal. Just keeping everything sort of straight and blending on the right hand side as well. And just making a little bit darker. There's a little strip of land just in front of the distant land there. So I'm just making that a little bit darker and slightly bigger using my size 4 round brush. And what I'm doing here is I'm just using a clean damp brush just to sort of blend and soften some of the sort of hard edges created by my previous sort of wash from the sky. So just blending that back so it's not too distracting, and also blending those dark marks for the distant land using a clean damp brush. And remember to get a damp brush, rinse your brush, take off the excess water off on a paper towel, then blend, which is what I'm doing here. You don't want too wet a brush or you could be in danger of creating cauliflowers and blooms. So I'm actually lifting off a little bit here and there as well to push back that land. I felt it was a little bit dark. Again, use a clean damp brush. So I'm using a diluted version of that colour. That's the pink with a pinch of ultramarine and a pinch of raw sienna. And I'm painting the reflections using my size 4 round brush, damp into damp. So if the paint bleeds too much, your surface is either too wet or your brush is too wet. So make sure you take off the excess paint off on your paper towel and keep those marks horizontal. Sort of they're like a mirrored reflection of the boat and the masts and poles. So again, just using a little bit more of a thicker paint now. So less water, more paint. That's the ultramarine with a pinch of pink and a pinch of raw sienna now. So it's slightly more blue-grey. And I'm just blending these horizontal marks damp into damp with my size 4 round brush. Mixing up some creamy raw sienna. I'm painting the reflection of the mast damp into damp with my size 4 brush. Added a touch more pink into that raw sienna and sort of painting this wriggly sort of lines here to represent the masts and poles, damp into damp. So be brave, but just lightly touch the paper and make sure you've taken the excess paint off and paint them directly below the masts. So they're like a mirrored reflection and it can look so effective. Try not to labour your paint, so almost paint once and move on. Adding a few more horizontal reflections to the boats using my size 4 brush, damp into damp, a little bit in the water as well to give a little bit more movement. I'm going to allow my painting to dry once more. For step 3, I'm going to paint light areas on the boats, reflections and masts. So painting the masts first, using my size 4 brush, painting wet on dry, using the quinacridone rose mixed with the raw sienna or a pinch of the Hansa yellow deep. So varying the colours, making this colour lovely and warm, dropping a little bit more pink here and there as well, just to vary the colours, all wet on dry. Mixing a little bit of ultramarine here with the pink and raw sienna and just painting some darker marks damp into damp. I've mixed up the ultramarine with a pinch of pink, a pinch of raw sienna. I've really diluted it. I'm painting these sort of paler sort of marks here, wet on dry. So they look like they're behind and they're smaller. So it kind of creates depth in the painting. I'm actually adding a little bit of cerulean here as well and dropping that in damp into damp, creating a little bit of detail here and there. Getting a little bit of the Hansa yellow deep with a pinch of pink. I'm painting the edge of the boat and the roof of the boat here, wet on dry using my size 4 brush. And doing the same with the middle boat, wet on dry, just a slightly diluted version, and the same with the boat on the right here. So I'm going to continue on painting the mast wet on dry, varying the colours. So just adding a little bit more reflection to the boat on the left here using a very diluted ultramarine with a pinch of pink and raw sienna. Remember to keep the marks horizontal. I'm just blending some of those marks with a clean damp brush. Mixing up a little bit of phthalo blue here. And I'm going to paint the boat on the left with this sort of cool blue, wet on dry with my size 4 brush. And I'm using ultramarine mixed with burnt sienna here and just drawing around the edge here and then blending that colour with a clean damp brush to make this part look more 3D. Adding some of that blue to the flag on the boat on the right and some more detail just beneath. I think it's a good time now to allow my painting to dry. For step 4, I'm going to paint midtones on the boats, the masts and the reflections. So I'm using Cerulean here, and I'm going to paint the boat on the left here, wet on dry, using Cerulean. I think I might have added a pinch of phthalo blue there just to make it a brighter blue. This is the kind of star of the show, so I want to bring it forward a little bit more. So just painting very carefully around the poles and the masts, using the size 4 round brush, working wet on dry. I am now mixing up a little bit of turquoise and I'm painting the boat on the right, wet on dry, again carefully around the poles. And now I'm mixing up Pyrrol Red with a pinch of pink. I'm going to paint the boat in the middle, again wet on dry, using my size 4 brush, carefully again painting around those poles. And it's quite a nice way because it's slightly darker colour than the pole, so it really kind of brings the poles and the mast forward to create depth in the painting. And I've mixed up ultramarine with a pinch of burnt sienna. I'm just painting some more reflections using my size 4 brush, wet on dry. Again, keep those marks horizontal. And I'm just blending here with a clean damp brush just to make everything look really natural. And adding a little bit more dark here and there, using the ultramarine with a pinch of pink and a pinch of raw sienna, wet on dry, using the size 4 brush. Mixing up some raw sienna here with a pinch of ultramarine. I'm just adding a little bit of darks to the reflections here and there, wet on dry with my size 4 brush, creating these very small little horizontal marks. Remember, they are mirroring the reflections to have them directly beneath each of the poles and masts there. And adding a few darks and details now to the masts and poles, using my size 4 brush with a mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna. I'm painting the left side of the boats with a little bit of cerulean. That's where the light is coming from. And now I'm using Paynes grey and I'm painting the right hand side where it's darker, wet on dry, again sort of painting up to the pole carefully using my size 4 brush. So just adding a little bit of dark here and there, wet on dry, still using that size 4 brush, and painting some markings on the rooftop here using ultramarine with burnt sienna. Just adding those details really brings the painting to life. For step 5, I am going to finish off with darks and details. So just adding a few darks here using Paynes grey. There's a little bit of shadow underneath the sort of rooftop here of the boat using my size 4 round brush. And it really does create a 3D effect there, and just adding some markings wet on dry there. Just adding a little bit more to the reflections here and to the roof, to the middle boat, adding a few more darks and details using a dilute Paynes grey, using my size 4 brush. So just adding a few more darks to the reflections beneath the boat there using Paynes grey, wet on dry with my size 4 round brush. I'm going to remove the washi tape. It reveals a white border and it gives me a chance to assess to see if I need to do any more to the painting. And here is the finished painting. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, starting off with quite a simple background and then building up the details with these 3 beautiful boats. And if you'd like to learn more about watercolour, get access to exclusive videos and downloadable outline sketches, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about that can be found in the description below, and you can cancel anytime. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.